Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle in this series Freemasonry and Satanism, video number 59, part 3. A continuation of Flying Saucers, Fact or Fiction by Max Miller, the young writer. It's like entering the Twilight Zone these days. And as I read on, you are going to see why it seemed like the Twilight Zone back in 1731, and it seems like the Twilight Zone in 2015. So anyway, starting out on page 11 where we left off from the last video, part 2, we're going to talk about Charles Fort, and as I indicated earlier and talked about him, I did get his book. And I promised to try to read it soon. It's only almost 3+ fingers wide. How many pages? 400,000? Over 1,000 pages. Should be a lot of interesting material in this book. So anyways, Mr. Max Miller referenced Charles Fort in his material here, so let me just proceed and read. Charles Fort, the master of writers, concerning the unexplainable and inexplicable, quoted one observer as relating the particular thing about the aerial objects was that they're moving in 4s, 3s, and 2s. And so perfect was the lining up that you would have thought it was an aerial fleet maneuvering after rigid drilling. Remember, this is in the past. Perhaps one of the most enigmatic among phenomena recorded in the past several centuries are so-called skyquakes. They are oftentimes associated with unusual aerial displays, not unlike some of the UFO sightings. Florence, Italy, for example, experienced an earth shock preceded by a luminous cloud, moving at high velocity, disappearing behind the horizon on December 9th, 1731. And on May 22 of the following year, several weeks before the shock, globes of light had been seen in the air. Globes of light. So globes are big round balls. So Charles Fort wrote this book. Got it upside down. Interesting. Published in Henry Holt and Company, 383 Madison Avenue, New York, 17. I wonder what year. $1919. And then some of it is as far as 1941. So I do my homework generally. I don't believe what I read. I look at the citations, the little number next to the quote, and I look up the book that author got it from, and I go buy that book. I don't know if you can see behind me, but I got bookcases and bookcases full of books, and I got closets full of books. 1,000 books maybe? So anyways, skyquakes. Globes of light had been seen in the air. With the 1816 earthquake in Great Britain, according to Sir David Malane, in Edinburgh New Philosophic Journal, a large luminous body bent like a crescent was seen. So a big luminous body, like guess the moon would be a luminous body. Like a crescent was seen. These phenomena go on virtually without cessation. So there's probably a lot of material in Charles Fort's book I need to read. Luminous objects were sighted over Pignoria, Piedmont, Italy on April 2nd, 1808, and were followed by explosive-like sounds. The Illinois earthquake on October 8th, 1857 was preceded by a luminous appearance, described by some as a meteor and by others as vivid flashings of light. These strange phenomena is related by Pornton in his book Earthquakes. Now this is important to understand with relation to 2015. With the if you're not informed, you should be. But let me just get some pictures. It's a funny thing, when you read enough of this material, you start to see some common denominators. And one of the common denominators about UFOs is they're popping into existence and popping out of existence. Orange glowing orbs, bright white lights, and streaking across the sky at thousands of miles an hour, moving from left to right to like this in an instant, which defies the law of the physics as we know. With that said, if you go on the internet and you look up Planet X or Nibiru, Herculumbus, the destroyer, incoming celestial body, you'll see plenty of videos and websites. They say that possibly there's an incoming planet. Notice the horns on this ball of orange. So I was thinking, with the law of physics as we know it, may not be all there is to physics. That probably goes without saying. So people have said, or are saying, they've taken pictures of this incoming body, and they're associating this with Zecharia Sitchin's work. Speaking of Zecharia Sitchin, I thought I'd get his book that I finally received. And as crazy as it seems, there's Nibiru on the cover. And the Anunnaki, aliens who apparently came to Earth, and as per Zecharia Sitchin's and other authors and people, they supposedly made mankind in their image, of course a little different. That's their theory of how we got here. Memoirs and Prophecies of an Extraterrestrial God. This is important because we're discussing the New Age in Morals and Dogma, and the New Age magazine by the Freemasons, the Illuminati, Satanism, and all these Satanism you see on TV with Lady Gaga at the Olympics, Miley Cyrus getting whatever they call that, sexual displays and other satanic things on TV and shows. Katy Perry during the Super Bowl halftime. Neil Patrick Harris during the Oscars getting on stage in his underwear. And so much more bizarre stuff which seems to be accompanying the rainbow in the New Age, which is a new world religion, with the supposed return of the aliens, the Anunnaki. It all does tie together. And as we are discussing UFO and aliens, and apparently Truman or other presidents have gone and had meetings with these aliens, one can only wonder what agreements they made, besides the one a lot of people are aware of, that the president allowed them to abduct a certain amount of humans for experimentation. Apparently they wanted to do some hybrid creatures so they could remain or start a colony on Earth. Could that be why they're into depopulation? don't need to get all the books and about the underground cities and on and on. So I thought about the physics of Nibiru, this incoming body, as described by these luminous clouds in Max Miller's book. And physics as we know it with interdimensional travel. How weird can it get? Supposedly that's Nibiru or some kind of sun with planets around it coming our way. I don't make this up. I just go on the internet, searched Nibiru in images, Planet X in images, and there you see it coming in on the bottom. They even tell you where it's coming from. And on the internet, on some of the satellite websites where you can see the sky, they show you stuff coming in at a particular angle. Meanwhile, people in Iowa and all over the country are hearing weird noises underground, booms and ground shaking, like those underground, maybe like those underground pieces of equipment that drill holes for subways and cities are at work. More pictures of supposedly a second sun rising. And here's an explosive picture here. Look at that. What if this body comes so close? Have you ever seen a volcano go off? And that debris in the sky that it shoots up, all of a sudden they have gigantic lightning bolts between that debris in the sky and the volcano, like that. But of course it would be like this from the volcano. So I'm just wondering, do we as humans really understand the physics of interdimensional travel? And with the HARP systems and all that, could there be interdimensional planetary-wise celestial bodies interaction with Earth? It's hard to know. So there you have it, the strange phenomenon as related to Ponton in his book Earthquakes. So they had, and this is going to be relevant in the future Nightcap magazine also. Why I go through such lengths to get us connected. Here we go, a railway man at Orchies near the Belgian border, this is important, Belgium, related the News Dispatch, said that he saw a fiery disk in the sky moving at great speed at the time of the DP explosion. Our current and common nauseance, the sonic booms or blast, see what I'm saying? Are these interdimensional doors opening and closing, and are craft coming through? Cannot help but be thought of it as a parallel light. If UFOs exist, and as physical objects exhibiting great speed, sonic phenomenon may occasionally account for such occurrences. Well, I mean, you know what a sonic boom sounds like, a jet. What kind of sonic or vibrations or effects would be felt from a portal opening in our space to another dimension to allow craft to come through or leave? When you read some of these sightings I'm going to be reading here, you would almost think that's what it's describing. Arthur Clarke noted British authority on rocketry, page 12. Space travel questioned the existence of the non-terrestrial saucer in an article appearing in the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society on May 1953. So the things the governments are up to that we people are oblivious about, it may not bode well for our ignorance, as we will see. By opening that from atmospheric pressure, building up ahead of the object, some of the UAOs, unidentified aerial objects, reported would have caused nothing less than concussions that would have blasted hundreds of square miles. Again, imagine opening up a portal in our atmosphere, like popping a balloon. What would it look like? What would it sound like? What would it do? Or if they are solid, he added, they must be above the atmosphere. Perhaps the countless sonic blast reports ended with source unknown or no explanation available should be re-examined in the light of the UFO. Moving on, and I'm only reading my highlighted pieces here. So I jump around just to read what stuff I read that I thought was an important sentence or paragraph. You can't read the whole book on all these. But it is a good guide if you want to go try to find the book. This is an older one, probably difficult to find. The only known expedition into the region, that of Professor Kulak's in 1927, found thousands of burnt trunks. Supposedly this is the big explosion up in Russia. Further away from the impact, the trees of the forest domain were fanned out for many miles. Fragments were not found, a frustrating bit of news to the meteorologist as well the UFO researcher. According to the Soviet professor Laipunov, as related in an article by M.X. Vandercourt in the French periodical of June 5th, 1953, the meteorite, for lack of a better description, was cylindrical or shuttle in shape, of gigantic proportions, sounds like a cigar ship, and traveled with relative slowness for that type of object. For several nights following the explosion, the Russian scientists said clouds at an altitude of 250,000 feet lit up from the inside. Huh. See what I mean? And were so intense that it was possible to read or photograph by the light they emitted at night. Professor Lunapunov suggest we abandon the concept of meteorite, you think, and term the object a cosmic shift of extraterrestrial origin. How about interdimensional origin? Apparently, the professor's hypothesis achieved some support, for another Russian scientist by the name of Kazanov has indicated his belief that inhabitants of another world came into the atmosphere of the Earth in 1908. Well, I do know in 1840, as I showed you already in my book, to 1940, there was the Psychic Society of Europe, and a few years after 1840, they started the American Society, Psychic Research Society of America, and they were doing seances and connecting with the spirit world. It was a big thing all over the world, and just prior to World War II, it did everything but vanished. I mean, it wasn't the big popular thing in the news rags anymore. But Hitler was big time into it. And he's the one with the flying saucers and the rockets they found at the end of World War II, which during Project Paperclip, the USA and the Pentagon captured what material and scientists they could, von Braun and many others, in a project called Paperclip, and brought all these German scientists to the USA, out west, Area 51 and White Sands and other places. They created cities for these men to live, and continued the research of the flying saucers and other technologies that apparently, possibly, that Hitler and all the other occultists, the Freemasons and all that, the New Age people who are into the Kabbalah and all that, what technology could they have gotten from the interdimensional world that existed probably forever? So they, on the other side, these spiritual beings who probably lived before Atlantis on Earth and elsewhere, I don't know, What technologies did they know that they're sharing with these New Age cult people, Illuminati, Zionism, banksters, secret black op programs, CIA organizations, ISIS, all over the world, connected, working against the social well-being of us USA citizens. Sorry to ramble on, but who are these entities? Why the secrecy? Why the planning for our demise with the USA Georgia Guidestones indicating they want a 500 million people level of population on Earth and to maintain it at that level, so those stones say, in Georgia, USA. Look them up. And the Pope and everybody, George Bush Sr. and Jr. and Obama, indicating a new world order, apparently more Luciferic in design, like I said, Katy Perry, Madonna, Lady Gaga, the people doing the triangle thing on TV, the devil sign, the one eye sign, the 666 sign, however they do it like that. You can see the 3 6s. And all the corporate logos with the 6s. So I'm connecting the dots. There's something nefarious. And I say nefarious because it's not boding well for the people of the earth as this New Age, New World Order program moves forward. Talk to the Ukrainians, all the countries in the Middle East, all the people in the USA homeless now. Say over 100 million people unemployed now. And of course they published a report last week that says we're short people and need more people. There's more jobs. They're lying. Blatant lying. While I'm at it, I may as well jump on this. Hang on. Something in the news today. I report. South Carolina National Guard drills door-to-door wellness checks armed with machine guns Monday, March 9, 2015. You got to go look it up. So let's see if I got this right. We got UFO alien craft sighted since 100 years, documented, and in the past historic times. And apparently we have Planet Nibiru. Coming to a neighborhood near you. Look at that. What does this have to do with this? Have to do with Egyptian... See the circle on his head? And the snake? And the bird's head on his body? And in LA or whatever, they got these guys with the wings on their shirts. SWAT team police officers doing exercises. Look at the symbol on his shirt. Look how they're gearing up. This says police on this shirt there. Why do police? Andy Griffin would have been ashamed of them. But anyways, March 9th, today, 2015, Brandon Turbeville, activists post Vigilant Guard, South Carolina. You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. Now, if there are MUFON reports, you can go check on the computer right now. People probably saw. And in this video, maybe I'll take a pause and print out a new report. But UFOs are sighted now. Orange orbs and other like signs. Meanwhile, in South Carolina, as reported on some of the alternate websites, in yet another example of the growing trend of the process of acclimatization of the general public to an open military presence. Remember, Obama in the news last week is trying to force the AK-115 ammo ban, and they've determined that not because it might harm police officers. And they've determined there's never been one police officer harmed by the ammo of the AK-155 or whatever it is. Why do they want to disarm the people while they're pushing forward the new social Luciferic agenda, the gay parades and all that thinking? While they're having open military presence on American streets, as well as general cooperation between the U.S. military and civil law enforcement, South Carolina was recently the scene of a statewide emergency preparation drill that incorporated both of these aspects in a visible form. Again, I hate to keep on beating this up. Do they think something's coming? Is that the reason? Or is that part of a more distraction and hoax? How evil are these forces? Here's a video you can go watch. Yaza.com, Planet X System Update. And astronomer R.S. Harrington supposedly was killed, who spotted the celestial body on 1978, chief astronomer for the U.S. Navy. So he went public with something he said he saw coming into the system, and he conveniently died. Meanwhile, getting back to South Carolina, and I will get back to the UFO book, and the mysterious luminous clouds, and the Iowa, my last video in the press release, or video, these shakes, booms, and bangs, they're hearing underground in Iowa, Kentucky, other places all over the world. What's going on? On March 7, 2015, a statewide drill entitled Operation Vigilant Guard took place under the pretext of preparing for the inevitable destruction of a hurricane would bring to South Carolina. Meanwhile, they're moving gigantic aircraft carriers into the area around Russia. According to reports in the local media, and by the way, media last week, Netanyahu was speaking to Congress and the House of Representatives, saying how important it was for them to immediately attack Iran and Syria, possibly do a preemptive nuke strike on Iran. Anyways, the drills were based on the premise of a landfall of a Category 4 hurricane and how they would respond to get citizens' help in the event while they were carrying, I'm adding this, machine guns. Hey, we're going to help you, but we have a machine gun to help you. The training involves South Carolina National Guard as well as National Guard units from Georgia, in addition to participants from local and state law enforcement agencies, as well as local and state officials. In the Florence area, there were at least 400 military personnel involved in the exercise. Remember, this is March 9th, 2015. This report just came out. And again, meanwhile, go on MUFON. See what kind of UFO sightings they saw in South Carolina. It would be an interesting thing to look at. Alright, so they're going door to door, calling in a wellness check in South Carolina. And the portion of the drills, I'm just reading a bit of this, that were witnessed by this writer involved a setup of 9 military tents outside of Florence, South Carolina airport. A number of trucks were present as well as Humvees, many of which were outfitted with machine gun turrets. Hey, there's a wellness check that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, doesn't it? Machine gun turrets and machine guns. And they're preparing for a hurricane drill. You'd think they would have bulldozers and backhoes to help clean up the mess, but instead they have gun turrets and machine guns. A sign reading Region 4 HRF was posted outside of the HRF stands of Homeland Response Force and a Region 4 representative of FEMA region in the area. You wouldn't believe it, and I don't want you to believe it. Go look it up. You wouldn't believe it. And you got a couple comments here. The militia were locally governed, reporting to the governor. Unlike the NG, now the NG is the second string of our standing Army, National Guard should never be used outside of this country, as it has been in Iraq and Afghanistan. The solution is simple. Exercise the first half of the Second Amendment, that being to form militias. So this comment writer says we need to start forming militias across the country, and I would add to that right away. The National Guard would not do this in an area where militias were present. We need to start taking care of ourselves. What? We have Planet Nibiru coming, they say. And we got Zachariah Stitchin convinced a lot of people of the world of the Anunnaki returning gods. With the Planet Nibiru you see in the picture there. I'm looking forward to taking the time to reading this shortly and adding this video as maybe number 60 behind the UFO series, because I've already done one on dragons and serpents, which was a lot about this stuff. And I want to marry them together with the Freemasons and Satanism and the New Age material that is coming our way. So you have to remember that when we're reading this. You have to remember what's going on in the background when you know what's going on in the foreground, and vice versa. Everything is connected. There isn't 2 Earths or 3 Earths or 3 or 4 separate secret gangs of satanic thugs in the world working against us. There's one united one, and under the united one under the pyramid starts at the top with the Illuminati. And if you go down the pyramid, draw it into little blocks like on the dollar bill pyramid, you can add in the York Rite, the Scottish Rite, the Rosicrucian, the Zionists, the Vatican, the Kabbalah people, the Hollywood people, the bank stores, the royalty, the kings and queens, the Bilderberger groups, Bohemian Grove, Club of Rome. There's so many. Council of Foreign Relations, Bilderberger, I said, Heritage Foundation, Forward Foundation, because all the foundations were taken over, as they say, charity foundations. They donate $100 to somebody and call it a charity foundation and wind up taking their millions and billions of grants and dollars they get from the government, working towards the New Age. And ironically, they say there's supposed to be separation of church and state. Anybody who knows anything knows that all the politicians, many of them, most of them, all presidents were related in Masons, and senators and representatives come from these lodges, get supported by these people once they prove themselves that they will support the secret agenda of the New Age. So the occultic, satanic, Zionism, Illuminati people control our government. So they know everything about UFOs and whatever there is in these other entities. And they're having, like in the Bohemian Grove, they're having satanic ceremonies where they throw a young child into the fire under a gigantic owl with a burning pit in the stomach called Moloch. Go look Moloch up. I think Moloch is in the Freemasonry Morals and Dogma. I'll take a look at that. We got so much to look at. So a railway man on page 12, near the Belgian border, related in a news dispatch that he saw a fiery disk in the sky moving at great speed at the time of the DP explosion. So we went over that. So that was the big explosion in Russia. Alright, so a cylinder and shuttle in shape, gigantic proportions, and traveled with relatively slowness for that type of object. Professor Lunaput suggests we abandon the concept of meteorite, you think I said? Beliefs that the inhabitants of another world came into the atmosphere of the Earth in 1908. Would that be Zachariah Stitchin's The Anunnaki? See the picture on the top of that? Just wondering. Alright, moving on. Apparently the professor's hypothesis has achieved some support from another Russian scientist by the name of Kazazu. Has indicated his belief that inhabitants of another world came into the atmosphere of the Earth in 1908. This latter account was published in the West German magazine believed to be Die Stern, sometimes in the late 1952-1953. Artist and explorer Nicholas Roche was traveling in Mongolia when one of several such few to observe the virtually ever-prevalent circular airfoil, the flying saucer. On 9:30 a.m. on August 1920, several of his expedition was watching a remarkable bird when suddenly one of the groups saw something far above the bird. "We all saw it," said Roerich, in Attire Himalaya in 1921. So they were in the Himalayan mountains, apparently where they have Shenandoah, not Shenandoah. What's the name of that? I'll think of it here in a second. Shambhala. I got to get my brains to go here. Shambhala. Apparently, on the Himalayan mountains, there's a gigantic city inside the mountain with ancient beings, tall, alien-looking beings from the descriptions, like the aliens that are cited by people, so they say. And this is back in 1921. This was in Nexus magazine. I need to dig those out. Over the last 10 years, I've done a lot of reading, so I know a lot of things. Something big and shining reflected in the sun like a huge oval moving at great speed, page 13. Crossing our camp, this thing changed direction from south to southwest. Through binoculars, he continued, they saw quite distinctly an oval form with a shining surface, one side which was brilliant in the sun. That was right there that I just read. "13 years later, in 1933, F.S. Schmidt headed the 1933 Mount Everest expedition. Writing in his book Camp 6, he relates, chancing to glance upwards, my attention was caught by a tiny silvery object in the sky, apparently very high, moving from east to west." 1933, Mount Everest. And thus we have the background and history to the present of the UFO. So that was the first chapter in Max Miller's book. And chapter 2, I'm going to do next, is World of Opinion. So that's just a lot there to chew into of the goings-on in the world right now with Russia, Syria, Assad, Israel, Netanyahu saying they need to nuke Iran, United States moving an aircraft carrier into the Baltic Sea, or one of the seas right next to Russia, joined by Poland and a bunch of other countries. And then, of course, they're going door to door with machine guns in South Carolina. All right. Another edition of the UFO Investigator. And when I read this, you're going to realize why some of that background material look at his shirt, the symbol. California, these guys are doing exercises. And of course we know that in South Carolina, they're going door to door today or whatever, with machine guns, saying it's a wellness check for a hurricane, with vehicles with gun turrets, machine gun turrets, and machine guns mounted on them in the area also. Suspicious. Meanwhile, Obama wants to remove the guns from people. And on the religious agenda, they want to bring us the rainbow group of the New Age, which is the Freemasonic people, hence my videos, Freemasonry and Satanism. So it seems to me that there is a, if the returning Anunnaki are related to Lucifer, that would be interesting. And with the symbols, it seems so. And the hybrid DNA of these creatures, entities, apparently are the kings and queens and the royal elites of all these families that have been ruling our planet, like all the presidents were related by Fritz Springmeier in his big, thick book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but notice the wings, notice the skeleton, notice the triangle, notice the owl or the bird there. And the sun's rays, like all the corporate logos. Something is amiss in our world, and we the people are completely unaware and oblivious to it. Some of us. Mars Canal's real new film reports show. So when they took pictures of Mars with the Mariner flyby craft back in I think 63 or something. I'll find the date here. But anyways, the Air Force and NASA said there was nothing to see here, folks. Look away. They were lying. An admission of the discovery had been made by Dr. William Pickering, head of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which controlled the Mariner 4 operations for NASA. Further confirmation has been made by Dr. Clyde Tombaugh, discoverer of the planet Pluto and leading Mars authority. Copies of the Mariner films show straight-line canals were recently shown to NICAP by Dr. Frank Salisbury of Colorado State University, a noted exobiologist who has analyzed the evidence for life on Mars. The canal markings could easily be seen, but did not reproduce well enough for an illustration. One of the canals appeared on Mariner photograph in the area marked 11 and 12 in the sketch below. So they were told, I know others who say they can't see the canals on Mars, Dr. Tom Burst told the assembled scientists, but I'd like to see them have their eyes examined. So apparently from the government facilities, they didn't want to report to the American people, but at the insistence of some scientists and NICAP, UFO investigator, apparently they did have some evidence that looked suspiciously intelligent made. How's that? National Press spotlights UFOs. This is the January-February 1966 issue. Since early January, nationwide publicity arranged or inspired by NICAP, magazine articles, newspaper features, broadcast lectures, has brought the biggest flood of mail in our 9 years of operations. Thousands of favorable letters. I could go on and on here, but I just want to jump to some of the descriptions of sightings. The Air Force has admitted that NICAP's spotlighting of the now famous Exeter, New Hampshire UFO sighting led to a re-examination of the evidence. As a result, the Air Force has retracted its erroneous statement. So the Air Force policy was to say, it's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. It's just a balloon. It's a mirage. It's the planet Venus. But upon further examination, when caught in their lies, and again, it seems like the governmental powers are working against the citizens in 2015, and for the last 20 years, it's becoming quite plain that they're preparing for a new world order. And 911 is a good example that really allowed them to make a leap forward in their adventure to conquer all the countries in the Middle East, and pass legislation to have everybody here in the USA monitored 24/7, frisked and scanned at airports, even bus stations or train stations, wherever they feel like, spot checking on the highways, and all kinds of other weird preparations for what? It now admits, the Air Force, that it had no explanation for the strange flying object seen maneuvering at low altitude by 2 police officers and a 3rd witness on the night of September 3rd, 1965. Meanwhile, they're publishing books about overpopulation, building gigantic microwave transmitters all over the world. Oh, there's some horrific stuff we're going to have to get into that they did on Project Montauk Island, abducting young boys from several nearby cities, apparently opening up portals, time dimensions, to other gateways, interdimensional, and forcing the children into the portals, knowing they're never going to be able to retrieve them. Underground cities they're building. And then at CERN in Norway, you got scientists coming out that's saying, we don't know what we're doing. We could cause a black hole. More books on eliminating growth by the Club of Rome. It says right there on the book. Another one of those organizations like the Masonic Lodges. And meanwhile, Van Doniken goes down to Ecuador and finds, I know I keep going over this stuff, gold plates of seemingly alien-type creatures and symbols that's on the dollar bill. You can't make this stuff up. The pyramid in the eye. Could this be a representation of a spaceship? Look at some of the descriptions of the UFOs we've read. Meanwhile, we went over this book. Walter Cruttenden talks about possible binary stars, incoming sun. And of course, all through 100 years, every month, they come out with these New Age magazines from the Freemason lodges, who controls everything, so obviously they know everything. All right. I was going to say, meanwhile, they're going door to door in South Carolina with machine guns. And Obama last week wants to take executive action to remove the guns and certain types of bullets and stuff from the people. Well, they're pushing forth the Neil Patrick Harris / Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Miley Cyrus agenda of a perverted world with satanic symbolism. See that one video where they carry Lady Gaga upside down with these thin underwear on? You can see her brown tail hole. How gross is our reality getting? How much will we allow this to continue before people speak up? Meanwhile, in the UFO Investigator, back in 1966, they wrote, on the evening of February 11th, 1966, an unknown flying object with a dome-shaped top was seen maneuvering over Skowhegan, Maine. By the way, I'm from Maine. And tracked by radar by Dow Air Force Base, Bangor. I used to live in Bangor not too long ago. The first recorded sighting was made by 2 Skowhegan police officers, Patrolman Robert Barnes and Special Officer Everett Laporte. At approximately 11:15 p.m., the officers observed that the domed UFO from their cruiser, easily visible because of its orange glow, there we go, orange glow, as described 1,000 years ago in some of that documentation I read. The unknown object slowed down and hovered above the town, going through several maneuvers before it speeded up and disappeared. 1966. That's quite a description. So an orange craft, glowing craft, speeded up, slowed down, disappeared. During this time, it was also seen by a resident of East New Portland, Mr. Porter Willis, as he was driving towards Skowhegan. Officer Barnes and Laporte estimated the flying object to be about 20 feet across, but since its altitude was not known, this was only an impression. So they assumed it from where they seen it. It could have been 60 feet across, could have been 100 feet across. According to the Skowhegan Police Department record, both Dow Air Force Base and Federal Aviation Stations at Augusta confirmed the radar tracking. An FAA official at the station said Dow Air Force Base reported picking up an intermittent blip over the Skowhegan, Augusta area. This blip, the FAA officials added, was making tight turns at a low altitude, and Dow personnel apparently were not able to determine if the object was an aircraft or not. Later, contradicting their own radar reports and ignoring the police officers' descriptions of a solid maneuvering device, Dow Air Force Base publicly explained the UFO as some sort of ground clutter, possibly weather. So you got police officers seeing a craft, but the Air Force would like to describe it as weather. You see what I'm saying with all this sidebar stuff I'm talking about? There seems to be us people who see things like this. Meanwhile, the government tells you there's nothing going on. We're just doing a welfare check in South Carolina with machine guns and mounted machine guns down around the corner. What's that got to do with a wellness check? And why is the government covering up all this stuff that's obviously going on? And these people saying that they want to get rid of Christianity. You don't believe me? Right on the back of this book it says it. Bottom, second from the bottom paragraph. This is New Age. That's a religion. Is it not? The entire separation of church and state, and opposition at every attempt to appropriate public monies, federal, state, and local, directly or indirectly, for the support of sectarian and private institutions. So they didn't want Catholic schools to get any money. And we know they want to bring us Miley Cyrus, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, and Neil Patrick Harris on the Oscars in his underwear. And we know that these people admit that they are a religion worshiping Lucifer, but they want the Christian religion, Jesus religion, and all the other religions to be eliminated. This is the future of the New Age. This is right out of the Bible. It's enough to give you goosebumps when you think about the proof here. Alright, the following report of a fast-moving UFO over California has special importance because the observer, Lieutenant Colonel Robert B. Staver, has had many years of experience with rockets and missiles. Colonel Staver, Army of the U.S. retired, is a graduate of Stanford University, one of the first 3 Army officers to work on rocket development in World War II. He was in charge of rocket projects at Aberdeen. Later, he was sent to Europe to investigate Nazi rocket operations. See what I'm saying? After the war, Colonel Staver was partly responsible for bringing Warner von, this is Project Paperclip I keep talking about, and other Penimonde rocket experts to the United States to help organize our missile and space programs back in 1966-65, or earlier, 47, 48, 49. So by this time, they probably had samples of flying saucers that they brought back from Germany. And what do people know? On January 3rd, 1966, Colonel Staver sighted a group of brilliantly glowing UFOs speeding over Los Altos, California. In his report to NICAP, he described them as a bright light sources with an estimated speed of 1,000 to 1,200 miles an hour. Now, call me crazy, but let's think here for a second. They really have these craft. People really saw them. Let's get that firmly embedded in our minds after all the stuff we're reviewing. And they're sending an aircraft carrier over to Russia right now. Netanyahu wants to nuke Iran. If there was intelligent life up there, you don't think that they would be intervening in this? And if they wouldn't intervene, do they really want to see World War III and a mass slaughter of people all over the planet? And the sky spraying that's been going on for 20 years? Ever since Ronald Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers, which I always suspected had something to do with putting in place their own kinds of people, because of the sky spraying and other nefarious activities in the skies. So it was a big lie when they fired all those things and Reagan said, they'll never work in this industry again. Coincidence? I don't buy coincidences. The objects were maneuvering back and forth. Colonel Staver reported it could not have been meteorites, so they're flying back and forth. Obviously not meteorites. Soon after the UFOs went out of sight, several searchlights began sweeping the area, apparently trying to spot flying objects. An observation of unusual interest reported to the Navy Hydrographic Office was made on December 16, 1965 by Captain J.L. Valdez, Master and Second Officer P.J.C. Right-Heaven of the British SS Carl Schmiedemann. At 2:05 December 16th, the ship was about 200 miles west of Lower California, course 326 degrees, when an increasingly brilliant moving object was observed. It was radiating a very powerful and directional light, the report states, in a spreading beam resembling a huge searchlight. At 2:07, the object had a brilliance of about 3 times that of Venus and was believed to be about 4 miles off. Climbing steadily, the UFO swerved northward. Then, at its brightest point, the ship's officers witnessed a remarkable change. Something happened to surround, something appeared. Listen to this now. This is why I went through the background material of interdimensional portals and other mysterious things. I pre-read this stuff, so I knew. Something appeared to surround or obscure the brilliant object, making it look, as the report states, like a small light radiating cloud. Didn't we read about that described in ancient history? A light radiating cloud engulfed the spacecraft. But no ordinary cloud could have obscured the UFO, for the sky was clear. This is right out of a science fiction movie or something. As the observers watched, the strange cloud rapidly increased inside, then reversed its direction. I'm reminded of an Indiana Jones movie Anyways, almost immediately, the report goes on, a small almond-shaped cloud, brighter than the rest, disengaged itself from the main part. You see why I say there's something different here, something interdimensional, something spiritual, something demonic. It's an interdimensional alien thing that we're dealing with, not some advanced intelligence from another planet that's more sophisticated intelligence than us, who is coming to save us. That's not the situation. Wish it were. We're dealing with principalities and powers not of this earth, as it says in the Bible. And they're Luciferian, in my opinion, with that temple you see there. And the Freemasons are trying to rebuild King Solomon's temple over there in Jerusalem. And King Solomon had a magic ring that could open up portals and bring demons into this world. Does this sound familiar? Jesus in the Bible cast out demons and spirits of people, exorcising at least a dozen cases. The Vatican has been training new exorcists lately because of the increased cases of possession. Who was it? Madonna, the other lady there? Who did Madonna hand off the baton of the leader of the Illuminati occult to? What was her name? I said it in the last video. Who went into a rage speaking in tongues, which scared her bodyguard off? People just don't know what's going on. Why are they wanting World War III? Why do they want to get rid of 90% of the people, kill them? Why are they killing all the Arabs? Why did they take over Iraq and all those other countries and send over SWAT teams of archaeologists to dig holes for something everywhere and loot all of the museums in Iraq and everywhere? Why? What are they looking for? What are we dealing with? Well, we know we got an oval-shaped object headed this way. A cloud-like mass grew rapidly in size. It would have looked like a well-developed cumulus cloud, except for its strange light. I'll let you leave this here so you can pause it and read it for yourself. Unbelievable. Okay, it radiated or glowed softly as if built up of fluorescence particles. The ship's officer described it. Now, these are pretty credible witnesses, right? An odd cloud drifted westward, its glow still faintly visible after 7 or 8 minutes. In the meantime, the report concludes, the small almond-shaped cloud had not changed its size or form, but continued its course in a northerly direction until 2:25. So like 2:25 p.m. in the morning, or it's 0225 time, when it was visible as a speck on the horizon bearing 330 degrees and disappeared shortly thereafter. Nightcap note. There are earlier reports of UFOs which have appeared to surround themselves with some kind of artificial cloud. See what I'm saying? There's something more here. There are also a few reports of UFOs which have appeared first as small symmetrical clouds, unusually noticed because of the changes in direction and speed, later emerging invisible as unknown flying objects. Though it can only be speculation, this December 16th account suggests that the first brilliant object was a carrier UFO preparing to launch smaller units for some purpose. So there was probably a gigantic mothercraft, like we've seen pictures in my other videos, preparing to launch smaller craft. So I guess it wouldn't be that hard to have a big craft that had little jets on the side that could emit steam or something, right? Smoke. Man-made. And with the guidance of the interdimensional spiritual beings from the other side that the psychic researchers were communicating with in the European Psychic Society. Just got to show you this. The Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research. July 1992. The reincarnation hypothesis. They're communicating with the other side. The government got involved in this, which is part of the Project Montauk, which is at the end of Montauk, Long Island. There's a closed base there now. There's been books written about it. Stuart Swervelo, we've gone over that, and we'll go over that material again and again and again until we get it. But they had these translation and language of the script in switching from the Unitera personality to the Sharada personality. So they had this person probably communicating with the other side, writing, and here was the language. Sharahata manifestations. I didn't even read this and prepare, but I just thought I would show you. I have many books of these European and American psychic societies that were in existence seriously, like the secret ISIS and Al-Qaeda and CIA and Masonic lodges are in the 1900s. These psychic research societies were very busy in the 1800s. Some crazy stuff. Nikola Tesla said on stage, and they tried to hush him up. He said, "I'm not the genius. I got visions of these devices right in front of my face. Dreams, audio." So whatever these entities were on the other side were feeding Tesla the information. He was smart enough to learn it and pick it up. Obviously, he was a smart guy and a good guy, in my opinion. There's something more going on, is what I'm trying to say. And it might behoove us people to wake up to see who the real culprits are. And it is apparently, it is satanic, occultic, Kabbalah, spiritual, meditation, yoga, all that stuff they're promoting, connecting us to these other beings in another dimension, who obviously from the results of their actions are not benevolent to mankind. And as it says in the Bible, apparently Lucifer hates humans, and he feels seriously slighted that God would look greater upon us than him. It enrages Lucifer, and so the deception and the destruction is going to continue, and they're going to try to destroy Christians and other good people, as we've seen throughout history. So anyways, so there have been many UFOs would appear to surround themselves with some kind of artificial cloud. There are also a few reports of UFOs which have appeared first as small symmetrical clouds, unusually noticed because of the changes of direction and speed, later emerging invisible as unknown flying objects. Though it can only be speculated, this December 16th account suggests that the first brilliant object was a carrier UFO preparing to launch smaller unit for some purpose. Possibly the initial cloud effect was incidental to the launching, but the expansion into a larger glowing mass is a puzzling factor. Aside from the cloud effect, the reversals and other changes of direction indicate an intelligently controlled operation. No natural phenomenon could explain this report. So again, I keep on interjecting here, but so we have these seriously intelligent, aware, knowledgeable people with these huge mother carrier craft, which I expect were probably manufactured on this planet. Buying into the interdimensional travel of spiritual beings is possible. The thing in Montauk where they were opening up so-called time portals and shoving children through them is a little bizarre. Imagine that, sending somebody back into the dinosaur era, unarmed, and never being able to retrieve them. So we don't know. Some dinosaur could have ate the poor kid. But then again, we do hear archaeological reports of finding objects thousands of millions of years old, which I suspect got there through an interdimensional portal, natural or intelligently created, because I do believe lightning and other effects can possibly open portals on their own, i.e., as we've seen in stuff like other books I've gone through in Charles Fort, and Oddities. I've showed you some other books, but they found whole whales and all kinds of weird things, like in Kansas, all over the world, stuff raining from the sky that came out of nowhere. So like the Philadelphia experiment, it probably got caught up in some kind of electrical magnetic vortex. What are we dealing with? What are we dealing with? Who were these creatures with these bird heads? And there's ISIS right there. Aren't they saying ISIS is attacking in the Middle East? There she sits. Why did they use the same name? Are they playing games with our minds? And you go on the internet, they're promoting this like it's nobody's business. All kinds of so-called scientific evidence. Nibiru is coming, Planet X, the Destroyer. Think not. This guy, one of the discoverers, wound up dead, Harrington. He and Mr. Stitchins got together and discussed the issue. See the map there of the solar system and another body coming in? This Harrington look him up, don't believe me, met and knew Zachariah Stitchins. There's the Anunnaki alien on top there. Meanwhile, John Perkins wrote this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, where the powers that be had this guy going all over the world, like Panama, Costa Rica, South America, all over the world, convincing presidents and leaders of nations to borrow millions and billions of dollars from the World Bank, Rothschilds, Federal Reserve, saying that they could build power plants and dams and bridges and all kinds of things, factories, and it would improve the livelihood and the well-being of the citizens of those countries, which was the furthest thing from the truth. It was economic destruction, like the book says, Confession of an Economic Hitman. They wanted them to borrow money they couldn't pay back, then they would become enslaved to the United Nations, Federal Reserve, World Bank, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Chases, Morgans. And when they didn't cooperate, we know a lot of the people down there got assassinated. And like in Panama, we invaded. And if you don't believe that, then they wrote a book called Report from Iron Mountain. It describes in this book by an elite group of people selected by the government. You can look this up on the internet and see it free and print it out and read it. That they were worried, it was around late 1960s, early 1970s, that they didn't know how to control the people after the end of World War II. So they decided to come up with terrorism, environmental pollution, global warming, and alien attacks, threats to convince the people to pay attention and do what the higher powers, the police powers, tell people to do. Then they had Roswell, where the cops even took batons to the children and threatened them to keep shut, not say anything, shut up. And then you got Colonel Corso, who have said to take in some of the electronics from crashed craft and spread it around to high-tech companies, and now we got flat-screen TVs and cell phones, which I suppose could be used for mind control and altering people's health, killing people with the high-frequency microwave pulses, cell phone towers, HARP systems. Then we got UFOs we went over with Richard Dolan, which, as it says right there in the book, enabled the threat of the alien threat, enabled the government to form a national security state. That's what it says. Look up Richard Dolan, see some of his videos, and he will tell you that the national security state is a direct result because of the UFO threat. They were awarded money by Congress. Believability by all this propaganda. That's why we have a national security threat. People like Harrington were killed. Was he going to tell us there really is nothing to worry about? So they had, and many other astronomers, if you look it up, have been killed. So much propaganda out there. The Nibiru. Look at the Egyptian connotation on the bottom. The pyramid. Remember the pyramid on the dollar bill. Remember the Bohemian Grove that our government officials, presidents photographed there. Bush, Reagan, Nixon, all kinds of people. They have a big bonfire. They have a big owl to throw a baby in the bonfire. Cremation of care ceremony, so they say. That's funny. A cremation of care ceremony. And we have a people going door to door in South Carolina for a well-being check. Toss a baby on the Barbie in the fire there with the Bohemian Grove, where our political leaders and CEOs and all these other people are at. Moving on to more issues here, and I'll try to wrap this up. I think we're getting the point here. There seems to be some credible evidence. The first report taped by NACAP was made by Howard Ball, an editor of the Patterson News. At 6:20 p.m. January 11th, Mr. Ball was near Wanacue driving to Patterson when he sighted an extremely bright light in the sky. Pulling off the highway, he was stopped. He stopped and studied the object, which was about 16 to 17 times brighter than a planet. So have you ever seen a planet in the sky? It looks like the size of a pinhead like this, like the red dot there in the sky. So it was 16 to 17 times that. It would have been this big as the size of a planet versus the red on this pen. Anyways, continuing on. The unknown object, growing brilliant blue-white, stopped for a moment, moved to northwest, hovered again, and then turned north-northwest. Mr. Ball was familiar with aircraft, also with the brighter stars and the planets, because frequently they had caused citizens to phone erroneous UFO reports to his newspaper. But this flying object was definitely an unknown. So it's believable that people probably saw these descriptions. The question is, why did they come here? Who are they? And what's the intent? And if we look at what's going on with the symbolism, bloodlines of the Illuminati. The wings on this thing. The wings and the sword on the police officers' shirts in California. I suppose these Nibiru thing has wings on it. Clues get warm in search for Planet X. Why is this stuff in the news? With Marshall Masters. Look up this video. Look at the name right there. Makes the mind wonder. How is all this connected? Why do they want to have World War III? Why are they going door to door in South Carolina? Why are they building underground facilities? Why have they attacked every country in the Middle East and now the Ukraine? Because Russia was in the way of the NATO, USA, Pentagon, Israel attacking the Syria. Why do they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple? Why the New Age material, meditation and yoga and all that by everybody across the country? Zechariah Stitchin's Planet Nibiru, the Anunnaki aliens returning. Again, as I keep saying, I think it's all connected. Alright, here we go. The Wanacue Reservoir Police Headquarters, close to the dam, Officer George Dykeman had a clear sighting of the UFO shortly after 7:30. It was a bright egg-shaped object, a little smaller than the apparent size of the moon. As he and other witnesses watched, the UFO stopped suddenly, turned and then hovered over the reservoir. It was something I never saw before, Dykeman reported. He watched it for almost an hour. At times, the strange object maneuvered around the reservoir, flying low in small circles. At other times, it changed altitude. At no time did he or any of the others hear a sound. During the evening, a reservoir employee, Fred Stein, saw the UFO glow reflecting from ice on the water. Garbing of this report evidently caused a widely published account that a beam from the UFO had cut a large hole in the ice. Maybe the craft needed some water. Around midnight, Stewart Air Force Base, Newburgh, New York, was quoted as saying a helicopter with a powerful searchlight had been on a mission over Wanacue at the time of the first sightings. 6 hours later, after the supposed explanation had been broadcast and used by the press, a Stewart Air Force spokesman, Major Donald Sherman, denied that a helicopter or any other aircraft had been in the area. So again, we find that the Air Force is doing everything to come up with excuses to deny what people see, making people feel foolish, ridiculing, discrediting. In the early hours of January 12th, after the UFO apparently had left the Wanacue area, Patrolman Charles Theodora of the Reservoir Police received a warning call from the Pompton Lake Police. They were chasing a UFO, they told him, and it was headed towards the reservoir. Shortly afterwards, Theodora saw a glowing object appear. It stopped over the pumping station and hovered. At times, the glow appeared to blink on and off. There's a little picture here of the NICAD, two investigators talking to a Officer Dykeman, describing the event. I like how that investigator has the hat and glasses and black coat on. Look at that. One of the investigators. So I'm going to just pass over some more descriptions here and go to another page and try to wrap this up. Page 4. Let's see what it says here. On December 26, 1965, Gibbs Smith assistant Jacqueline Wingfield was driving near Kakapukwe with a Danish girl named Mortisson when she saw a strange object moving across the sky. The UFO was solid, round, metallic appearing object, with a bright, flame-like exhaust at the rear. It traveled swiftly, making no sound. Miss Wingfield had time to snap one photo before the UFO disappeared. Later, Gibbs Smith had it developed, then locked up the negative. The photograph is reproduced in the Illustrated London News, Figure 5. It shows a dome-shaped object with a rounded edge forward, emitting a long elliptical trail like an exhaust. The news states, with Gibbs Smith and Percy Hillman prepared to stake their considerable profession reputations on it, there can be no doubt that it is genuine. There's no loophole for faking, he told the London News. I've shown it to too many top photographers and they can make neither head or tail of it. I'm not prepared to say what it is, but one is left with no other present alternative to accept that it's interplanetary. Again, and I can hate to keep on doing this, but I'm going to, but Zachariah Stitchin, some say, was paid by the CIA and other forces to come up with all his stuff. Since the early 60s, after World War II, they were building underground facilities like crazy. We know they built the HARP systems all over the world. We know they wrote many books about too many people on the planet, and they got the USA Georgia Guidestones. And what's that got to do with interplanetary beings possibly meeting with our president? What kind of agreements have been made? What's going on with, well, obviously, like the movie Hunger Games and Divergent and all the other satanic stuff on TV with all the actors doing this and devil signs and sixes, you see, and other symbolism. Madonna, Beyonce doing satanic rituals during Super Bowl halftime show. Look it up on the internet. Clearly, Homer Simpson and other cartoons and other things, the card game Illuminati, showing the Twin Towers being blown up before it happened. What's up? All right, the first nest reported by George Peedley, 27-year-old banana grower, was located in the swamp area called Horseshoe. So on January 19, 1966, he was driving his tractor near the swamp when he heard a loud hissing noise above the tractor's sound. Then he saw a blue-gray spinning object take off 25 yards. In front of him, the UFO, about 25 feet across, 9 feet high, rose vertically some 60 feet, dropping sharply, rose again, and sped southwest, appearing in seconds. The Royal Australian Air Force was asked questions. So that's quite a description back in 1966. When Peedley said the UFO had taken off, dead reeds had been flattened in a clockwise direction. I'm thinking of the crop circles and all those depictions of UFO aliens and planetary movements and bodies that we've all seen. What's going on? What's the truth? Why are these guys preparing and gearing up with and having vehicles shipped to them? Some city councils and counties and cities are not accepting these SWAT-type vehicles from the federal government for free. Saying, we don't want them, we don't need them, we're not going to attack our people. But apparently this stuff is being forced on the police departments everywhere. Meanwhile, they're going door to door in South Carolina with machine guns. While we've got these intelligent craft all over the world. Somehow it's got to come together. What's up? Millions learn of Nightcap. There's another whole page of descriptions. Like I said, maybe I need to figure out a way to package this stuff up and let people get copies. Millions learn of NICAP UFO evidence. In the last 2 months, over 20 millions have learned of NICAP and the impressive UFO evidence. Where's that evidence here in 2015? Why do people get glazed eyes when you mention aliens and UFOs right now? Like they think you're a nut. Why? It's because the mind control has made people think like that. You got TV shows. I Dream of Jeannie, The Monsters, cartoons, Star Trek, Lost in Space, all kinds of movies, and it makes everybody think it's all imaginary. Reality has been taken out of the equation. People don't know what reality is. But anyways, millions learn of the NICAP UFO on page 5 here. Moving on. And in the last video, we had one picture there that the Air Force says was blurry, if you remember. And they mentioned in this article that the guy actually took 3 pictures. He was working for the city transportation department, and he took pictures of different stop signs and incidences and, you know, repairs. He had a Polaroid camera. So here was another picture that he took that the Air Force says was too blurry, so you can't see anything in it. Now, it was a Polaroid camera. He worked for the city transportation department. What do you think that is? He's got his company truck. So I think the NICAD people did a good job. Here's Kehoe. Picture of him in this thing, and all the newspapers and NICAP directors and a lot of politics with NICAP. Board of Governors. So they were a lot of serious people. And then wild claims. We cannot emphasize too strongly that we have absolutely no connections with persons making preposterous claims regarding UFOs. Examples below show that the harmful policy that ridicules claims can cause. Again, you just wonder if some of these New Age people, communist type people, seriously controlled socialism, which is going to be microchipped humans per the Bible, and who knows what these Anunnaki, Zachariah Stitchins, aliens coming back are going to have to do with all this. We're going to revisit some more of this book, because I like doing these NICAP reports. And bear with me on all this alternative points of view I bring into the picture. As I keep repeating, I think everything is connected that's going on. Alan Greenspan saying that they want to do a program called Creative Economic Destruction. Spoke before Congress and said they were doing that. And the congressman said, Alan, won't some people get hurt? See, they're actually trying to bring the economy down to weaken the human people. Meanwhile, they're sky spraying us. So, and then fluoride in the water. And now they're telling me that the stuff that they spray on crops is loaded with fluoride. So when you eat apples or potatoes, if you eat the skin, you're getting more fluoride in your system, which messes with your pineal gland in your brain, which is your ability to use your higher consciousness, like me using a pendulum here, asking my higher consciousness for the truth in this NICAP report, which it says it's a positive. How much of this documentation is true? It says here the writers of these NICAD are trying to tell the truth. Does that work or not? I don't know. But we're going to dwell into a couple books on that. Because like I said, apparently in Montauk and other places, the Black Op programs, like Clifford Stone, look him up, was working with the government when they invaded an underground tunnel system out there in New Mexico, Delsey, and apparently found lots of humans, young people, women, and all that, in cages. which has been reported by Miles Johnson. Look that up in his series, Miles Johnston. And he's talked to a lot of people who were rescued and whistleblowers about mind control and people being put in cages and tortured, and human babies fed to big boa constrictors. And they did all kinds of weird things, these evil people. With that said, I should probably go show you one more thing I discovered. Crazy. I've yet to read all this, but the pictures are fascinating. As you know, as I've said, I collect old books. Harper's Magazine. Volume XLL. Published, you're going to love this. Back then, in 1870, they didn't have internet, of course, or newspapers across the country of the United States. So what they did is they published these big, thick books. This is an old book. 1870. It has all kinds of articles, what's going on in England, what's going on in the world. Stories for people to read. It was like, I guess, television or radio back then. They didn't have television or radio. But they had pictures of things in here about the Mediterranean and the Pacific. Here's some people. So here you are in Kansas, and you want to keep up what's going on in the world. You got this Harper, the old love again story here. And they didn't have photography, so what they did is they used people who were artists did sketches. What's this got to do with UFOs and Anunnaki? Well, I'm going to tell you, I want to talk about insanity. Apparently, there were a lot of people who didn't want to fall under Rome's Pope's rule, where they had statues of Jesus and Mary, which is worshiping idols, which is, it says that's the commandment, thou shalt not worship idols. So there were some original Jesus Christians who would not fall under the Pope's Rome's rule. And there are 3 valleys of singular interest open from the higher Alps into the rich plains of the Piedmont below. And anyway, so the Vatican would have these people arrested. And here's what they did to them. That's in Paris. That was the Christianity of the Pope. I grew up Catholic, by the way. So apparently in higher North Italy, they got some mountains. 1870 in this Harper's Magazine. So they would go up there and try to capture these people who would not fall under the rule of the Pope and had their own religion of Christian behavior with no idols, the original Christianity, Jesus religion. And when they did get them, look at the priests there, burning this guy alive. What kind of religion comes out of the Vatican, the Club of Rome, that wrote this book, The Limits to Growth? You see where I'm connecting the dots here? And the Georgia USA Guidestones that say that they want to 500 million people on the planet. I suppose that's enough for them to rule the planet and keep control. 6 or 7 billion may be too many for these evil people. The New Age folks. The folks making the HAARP microwave transmitters that could probably kill people en masse, and the sky sprang with who knows whatever plagues. I'm just trying to point out here the mentality of the people we are dealing with. Most of us people can't fathom this kind of behavior. Look at the Pope sitting in the chair. They're burning the guy up. Did you see that? They got a fire going on. They're going to cook the guy. You can see the Pope in the background with the Tree of Life staff in his hand. Go back and look at that. Women buried alive. They were burying women alive. I hate to say it, but what are we dealing with here? They were throwing them off cliffs. You're not going to believe this? They would take children and rip them in half. It gets worse. They would roast people. So here you are in 1870. There were UFO sightings back then. And you got your edition of Harper Magazine. Look how old this book is. 1870, 1970, 150 years old, 35 years old. They're roasting these ladies. They're roasting them. Guy's sitting back like he's having a barbecue. They poured molten metal down their throats. What are we dealing with here? They threw them into burning jars of fire. You're not even going to believe this. Furnaces of fire. They threw them in there. It's almost enough to choke you out. You think? So anyways, the stuff I discover. And then we have, as I'm going to say again, it's just to bring the reality of this to home. Going over the book. The sightings, nightcap. Strange cloud formations. Strange New Age, New World Order religion, bringing back the Luciferian doctrine. Look up the U.S. Army receiving tractor-trailer loads of guillotines and FEMA camps. And remember those pictures coming out of the Vatican. Throwing people in the pots of fire, ripping children in half. What are we dealing with? Has the humanity advanced? Would they go back and do something as evil as this? Obviously, they're writing books about too many people, putting up U.S. Georgia Guidestones, creating microwave transmitters, shipping drones all over the United States. Netanyahu in Egypt is wanting to nuke Iran, one of the other countries resisting the Israel New World Order control. So I hope I didn't weird you out too much with this video. Some people say I'm a little insightful. I'd like to think I'd like people to wake up and realize what we're up against. What's with the aliens? I got a couple more books in the mail recently. Flying Saucers, Amy Mitchell. Look at the craft there. Some of the pictures inside. Look at the pictures of the moon there. Planet Mars, 2 views. So they got some mysterious pictures of planet Mars. Who knows what's obscuring the view? And as you know, I like to collect books. Flying Saucers taken by Barney Wayne in Ballyou, Southern Rhodesia. Another one taken by Salem, Massachusetts. Another one taking American photograph. So you got pages here of photographs taken by people of UFOs. Stranger than true. Some more weird stuff. So when I did take my pendulum over these books, this one here, Amy Mitchell seems to be disingenuous, not telling the truth or having a detrimental purpose in writing this book. Am I mistaken here? It's saying no. And again, you don't have to believe that the pendulum works. I do the research. Then we got another one here, Flying Saucers on the Attack. Amazing, hundreds of reports of UFOs. Author asks, are they friendly visitors from outer space or invaders? Now, if it's Zechariah Stitchin's Anunnaki, and they're arming up our police departments, and they're ordering guillotines shipped to the army bases, and this is another negative on this book, means somebody's not, is writing it for propaganda. How's that? And Harold Watkins, is this true or false? So, Flying Saucers Uncensored. These books were published 1955. Thought I'd share with you my continuing investigation. And thank you for watching my video. And we gotta wonder, go on the internet and check out this Nibiru threat. And I'm reminded of, again, of a higher physics than we all know, a spirituality, interdimensional, demonic, reptilian, hybrid creatures, as described in the Atlantean area, and David Icke and many other people, and the symbolism coming out of Hollywood and the news and all the other threats, and the economic destruction described by Alan Greenspan, and Israel's Prime Minister Sharon, in a heated argument in the Israeli Congress. They were complaining that the U.S. would intervene if they went ahead and killed off more Palestinians. And Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said, "Don't worry about the USA. We control the USA." That's what he said. Look it up. And who controls Israel? Who created Israel? That would be the Rothschilds, the Illuminati. During the beginning of World War I, there was something called the Balfour Agreement, where the Rothschild, the Bank of Germany, and England, said that it would get the United States in the war with Woodrow Wilson, who got reelected, who also conspired to cause the Federal Reserve to be created on December 21, 1913, while all the congressmen were on vacation. 6 months later began World War I. And so the Rothschilds with the bank, and now the controlling issue of the Federal Reserve in the United States, which means they controlled the USA. They deceived the people and got the people into World War I. And all those people in trenches with machine guns and sniper rifles and bombs, and World War I, it was a big war. They called it the World War. It was the first one. So, I'm reminded of those pictures coming out of the Vatican about killing the people who would not join the Rome's church, the Catholic Church, who were Christians, still worshiping Jesus without idols. It makes one ponder all this stuff going on. Like I said, Prime Minister of Israel, Sharon, said, don't worry about the USA, we control the USA. And they're controlled by the Illuminati with the Balfour Agreement, creating the State of Israel. And all of this stuff, I think, is connected with the New Age, the New One World Religion. As Albert Pike said, there would be 3 world wars required to bring about the One World Order. And I'm wondering, is it the Zachariah Stitchin's Illuminati? Where have I put that book? Are these entities coming back on this planetary system to take over the planet and enslave everybody? Hey, it's a plausible theory as anything else. Something's going on, and mankind obviously can be very sick, as we saw with those pictures from the Harper magazine. And we know the mass murdering of with helicopters, with pilots from NATO countries and Pentagon, or machine gunning Arabs, and the stuff they're doing in the Ukraine, and the Boston bombing, and the Sandy Hook, and 9/11, and the Oklahoma City bombing. And I could sit here for a couple hours listing the proof that we people of the world need to wake up. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.